Right, well, let's see if we can start. Let's actually get my reference sheet going here. Okay. And let's start it off with a bang. And let's go with the stationary heavy there. So they're rolling 2 dice, looking for 6s, I would think. Let's see, you hit on a... Yep. Okay, if it was close range, they would be hitting on 4, 5, or a 6, but it certainly isn't that. So let's roll them up and see what we get. And we've got nothing. Yeah. Okay, and then we have the other battalion next to it, which gets to roll 1 die. Let's see how they do. And they've got nothing at all. Okay, so nothing to worry about there. So combat, desultory fire. Nothing happened. Next phase is exhaustion. Nobody's exhausted. Nobody's taken any casualties. So that is indeed the end of the Russian first turn. Right, here we are in the second French turn, which is 4 p.m. And this is just a little short piece. What I've done is I've actually, or rather the French commander, that is to say, the Emperor himself, Napoleon, has almost finished his move. The infantry have moved. The commanders have still got to move a bit. Artillery, interesting things going on here. But the point I'm trying to make here is here, Grouchy's cavalry corps has shot forward as predicted. And what they've done is they've met the skirmishing Cossacks and Uhlans over here. And this is just the first half of their move, because what happens is when they contact the skirmishing cavalry, then the skirmishing cavalry has to retreat half their move straight backwards away from the enemy. And because they're skirmishers, they will not interfere in any way with forces behind them. Unlike formed units, if they were retreating through units in the first half of their move, they can disorder them and all that sort of thing. Right. Okay. But so they will just sort of wash back here, like rain through a grate, as Wellington said, I believe. And then what will happen is from this point that these chaps reached, they have all got half their move left, in which they can proceed. And if they can make it, they can even charge the enemy. And that's what the Lancers are doing over here. They're going to sweep those aside. They will retreat half their move, which will actually put them on top of Friends. So they'll have to be pushed back beyond that, and they'll end up to the rear of the Friends. And then, actually, I got to look that up, make sure I got that right. I hope I've got that right. And the Lancers will be able to charge home, which they are going to do. They're sticking their necks out. They're going to charge against these chaps here who are not stationary, and they think that that's worth having a go, because they might be able to disorder them in the morale test that will take place after they've made contact. And if they are distorted at the beginning of the melee, then that's a serious disadvantage. Right. So I just wanted to show the mechanics. I've never actually done this before with skirmishing cavalry like this, or at least I don't think I have. Maybe I did it back in. It's a long time since I've used skirmishing cavalry. I think skirmishing cavalry was about at least 25 years ago when I was playing some American War of Independence stuff, and there were like 1 or 2 units of skirmishing cavalry around. Okay, there you go. Okay, so here we are at the end of French movement on the 4 p.m. turn, the second French turn at Brienne. And let's see what we've got. Well, the remainder of the reinforcements that were coming on with the Emperor have indeed come on. And we've got this division here, which is, let's see, it's 2nd Corps, Division des Réserves de Paris, the 1st Brigade and the 2nd Brigade, and they are commanded by Gérard. Okay, they've come on with the Emperor. Actually, I can't remember if he was already on. Perhaps he was. And also some artillery. The artillery came on first, so that shot off over here, or wheeled itself up to here. And I think that's... Wait a minute, I need to correct a mistake there. I haven't rolled any dice since I did these, so I am going to be correcting a mistake, because them facing the enemy is my way of saying that they're deployed. We're not going to do that because that's as far as they could get. Let me just check. I got to check this. Hang on. Here we go. Simple detail. They didn't have enough movement to be able to deploy at the edge of the orchard, which meant that they would be in the orchard and they wouldn't be able to see out of the orchard. Not much point in them being deployed there unless they're sort of bracing themselves from an enemy attack or something. Anyway, so yes, mistake, they're still limbered. Notice with the orchard, the only troop type that pays any kind of a penalty for being in the orchard is formed cavalry. So even artillery can just breeze through the orchard with no problem on movement. Visibility is another thing. You can't shoot through an orchard, for example. Anyway, let's stay with the big picture here. So, yes, these chaps have come on, and these, of course, although they have decent enough morale, sort of typical morale 5, they are poorly trained. So that means that I think it means, if I remember, they don't get a free formation, facing change. Anyway, so there they are, marching smartly up the road. These other chaps have just deployed smartly into a line, getting ready to assault the enemy. Now, of course, if they did just march straight up to the enemy, they'd be at a huge disadvantage because the enemy, as we can see all the way along here, is stationary. So they're going to have an ace up their sleeve before they do that, I would think. And also these chaps are in a town. So what they've done is they've formed up a nice crisp line, but they have stayed back so that they are not within 200 yards, which would be the range of the musketry from these chaps, nor are they within 400 yards, which is the close range of this light artillery here. Okay, so they stayed back, so the light artillery can certainly fire on them, and it is stationary. They are going to have to pay the price for that. Although that's not going to happen. No, that only happens so-called counter-attacking. It basically means that the non-phasing player can fire. They can only do that if they were fired upon or if they're within close range of the enemy, and they are not. So they will not be firing. So these will not be fired upon by anyone. Right. Moving along. Let's see. This artillery was already stationary. This artillery has deployed. This artillery is deployed as well. This came on from down here last turn. And so let's see, none of them are heavy. Okay, they're all field artillery, yes. And so that one's stationary, so he's going to do rather better than those two. They're all firing at beyond close range. Okay, so they're going to take pot shots at these chaps down here, hopefully to sort of soften up the end of the line so that then if they, for example, were to charge them, they might be able to make some progress. Okay, so Napoleon is trying to put some sort of emphasis here on the extreme right of the Russian formation. Right, what else has happened? Well, as we said, the cavalry, Grouchy had to hang back so that he could command these artillery units here, keep them in command. But the divisional commanders, of course, as we might imagine, have gone forward. Actually, I can just arbitrarily do that, that's a bit better there. That's where he should have been, that's no problem. And let's do the same with him, for that matter. There we go. Right, so yes, there we have Lefebvre Denuet, and we have Milieu, and they're going forward with their chaps. Now, they've swept, as we can see, the Cossacks and the Uhlans, the skirmishing light cavalry, away. They've gone like a rain through a grate through their troops, and they're back here facing the enemy. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to do something, didn't I? I need to mark them as disordered. Let's do that. And there we go. I like to mark my disordered units with just a little bit of hamster bedding. You see, this is just white, so shows that they're taking some sort of pounding. All right, and then of course after the cavalry had contacted the skirmishers retreated or retired half their move back to there, and then the cavalry themselves were able to then continue after that by moving half their move or the remainder of their move, whichever was less. So half their move was less. So they carried on, and as I said before, the Lancers had their eye on these chaps here, these Russian musketeer units, standard infantry, and then so they've charged home there. They are going to take a morale test. They have their high hopes, well, they've got hopes at least, that they will disorder the Russians. We shall see. Then moving down, we've got the heavy cavalry and the medium cavalry here. Have just gone straight towards the opposing Russian cavalry. And let's see, the Russian cavalry is, if I remember correctly, yes, that's right. They're medium and they're light, so they are heavier than them and they are heavier than them. So they're hoping that that's going to prove handy. We shall see. Of course, you've got this gun here, which is a bit of a problem, right? But they've hung back so that they're not within the close range of the gun, so that they don't have to take a morale test now. They're not within 400 yards of that gun, okay? Then the same thing has been done here. They've hung back so they're not... I actually don't think they could even have got close enough to be within the close range of that gun. But anyway, so they're back here. There's a skirmisher unit here who surely I would think... I've got to look that up. I would think that he's got the same range as anyone with a musket. I don't think they have, in this period, I don't think they have extra long-range weapons, unlike perhaps the American Civil War or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if his range was 200 yards, which is that. I'll look that up and make sure we keep him honest. So yeah, they're getting ready to charge. Now, if this situation is relatively unchanged on the next turn, of course, which of course it may well not be, but if it were, then that would mean that these units, and these are medium and they're lights, could charge that one unit of lights there, and we could get some interesting results from that. But of course, as you can imagine, you know, it all makes sense. If they just went forward and went slam into them, the thing is that that gun would be there. They would be in close range of the gun, and they would have to take a morale test, and also would be fired at by the gun in close range. So, you know, there you are. Okay, so what we have to adjudicate then is we only have, the next thing to do is morale tests, and we only have one, which is to say these chaps here, both these units here, the Russians and the... I'm pretty sure it's the Polish cavalry there, the Polish Lancers, are going to be doing a morale test. So it'll be the first morale test of the game. Terribly exciting. Okay, we're going to test morale. Now, near as I can figure out, it's been a while since I've done this, but near as I can figure out, the only consideration is that these chaps are non-secure infantry. That is to say, they don't have infantry on both sides of them. So that counts as a -1 if they are, let's see, non-secure infantry meleeed by cavalry. Right. So they've got a -1. So their morale is 5. That takes them down to 4. Their morale is 6. And the test will fail if the die is rolled and is higher than the number rolled. Well, they have a morale of 6. They cannot roll higher than that with a 6-sided die. So we actually don't have to test them. But we will roll for the Russians. So if they roll higher than 4, their morale has failed. And they are fine. Yes, so both sides have passed their morale test. The Lancers are disappointed. They were hoping that they would be able to disorder the Russians before the melee gets underway. And, well, that didn't happen. So now it's time for combat, and as we know, we have got several situations where, well, yeah, we no, the Russians won't be firing. That's right, because no one is in close range of the Russians. You might sort of say, well, what about these chaps over here? But you have to be within close range and firing arc for the enemy to fire at you. Yeah, I'm thinking about morale tests now. Yeah, so the firing arc is 45 degrees, so there's nothing coming from there, there's nothing coming from there. But, so nothing coming from the Russians. Yeah, you can counterattack, that's right, if you're within close range. Okay, so if if that unit had been pointing at them, they would have been able to fire right now because they would have been in close range and within firing arc. That is not the case. Okay, so what do we got? We don't have firing from the Russians there because they're too far away. They're not within close range. However, the phasing player has got these guns here, and they are certainly ready to fire. They're stationary. They are not. That means they're going to be rolling. I can do that now, can't I? They're going to be rolling 2 dice. There we go. And they're going to be rolling 1 die. There we go. Right. Okay, I was just checking the details, and looks like we're ready to go. There are no considerations about savings throws that I can find. So they're going in. They're going to be hitting on 6s. And there are 4 of them. So let's bring literally the heavy guns in first. So this is the 3rd Guard Cavalry. Well, sorry, they're not heavy guns. No, they're stationary is what they are. So they are firing at these chaps down here. And let's see what we got. And we have a miss there. Nothing going there. We're looking for 6s. And then we have these chaps here. Let's give it a good shake. And in we go. Nothing there. And then from these chaps here, give it a good roll. And we have nothing at all. Look at that. Okay. So, well, we had 4 out of 6 chance of getting A6, and we didn't get one. So, right, that's that shooting done. There's no other shooting taking place. Well, there's no other combat. You don't have to do the shooting first. You can do it in any order you like. But we've got now the melee going on here. So let's adjudicate that one. All right. So let's do... oh, that's right. The Lancers have got 4 dice. They're a cavalry brigade. The Russians would have 4 dice. They're not stationary, so they would have 4 dice, but they have dedicated guns, so they have 5 dice. Okay. And just one sec. Yeah. So the Lancers, let's say the Lancers charge. So just for, it's really simultaneous, but let's do the Lancers first. They're looking for 6s, as you might imagine. They've got 1 hit. Okay. So there's 1 blue 6. There's our hit. Okay. So what are the Russians going to do? They've got 5 dice. So we might statistically expect them to do better. And oh, look at that. Nothing at all. So the Lancers have won the melee. Right, what do we do now? All right, and there's our result. The Russians have to retreat half a move, disordered, directly away from the enemy. So they've gone back here 800 yards because their move is 1,600 yards. We can see with the smoke there that they are disordered now. And they have lost 1 strength point. There were no saving throws. That's another mechanism in Volley and Bayonet, but there were no reasons that any of those die rolls had to be contested, as it were. So they've lost a strength point. The division, all the divisions have exhaustion points, and so the division who is that? That's, oh gosh. Let's see, what's his name again? Sorry about this. Yeah. Bernodosov. Yeah, okay. There we go. That is him, right? Probably. Yes. That's right, the 18th Division. Right. That particular division can take 4 hits, or it takes 4 hits to make it exhausted. And once the division is exhausted, it's still here, but bad things start to happen, especially the possibility of division collapse. Anyway, so they've taken 1 hit, and if the division, that's a division, those 2 units there, if they took 4 hits, they would be exhausted. So they're 1/4 of the way to being exhausted. There was no damage, of course, done to the Lancers. The Lancers had the option to advance and occupy the position that was occupied by the enemy, but I thought that was sort of sticking their necks out a bit too far. So they've actually just stayed where they are. They could have changed facing if they had wanted to. And I kind of forgot about that. I could still do that now, but I don't think I want to. I think they're just fine where they are. Yes, so one of the things you generally want to have, if possible, is if you're the sort of troops, if you're not skirmishers, if you're the sort of troops who can cause a real problem for your friends, if you have to retreat through them in your first half of your retreat move, then you're going to have problems. So what you don't want to have is, you wouldn't, for example, want them to get attacked anytime soon, because they'd have to retreat. They go slam back into them, which would cause all kinds of problems. Here, all the cavalry here can quite happily retreat. Although, well, I mean, it could be that, they get pushed back and puts them in the way of them getting pushed back, for example, but you can't have perfection. So they're going to stay there. They can quite happily retreat back to there if they had to. Who knows what's going to happen on the next turn with the Russians? I would imagine certainly that, let's see, this artillery here could certainly pivot and fire at them at close range, which means that at close range they would be hitting on a 4, 5, or a 6, which wouldn't be very funny. No, it wouldn't, would it? Ouch. Right. Anyway, that's where we're at now. That's combat done. There's no exhaustion, so that is indeed the end of the French second move, and we go on to the Russian second move. Okay, and here we are at the end of movement in the Russian second turn, so that's the 4 p.m. turn, and I've already gone ahead, as you probably notice, and put out the dice that will be required to resolve combat. As we can see, there's quite a bit of it about. So let's take a look at what was done movement-wise first of all. Some interesting things going on. Well, down here, let's see. Basically, we had the skirmishers, of course, the Uhlans and the 3 units of Cossacks were sort of back here after having been pushed back through the formed unit. So they were back here and they were disordered. So what they all chose to do was to spend half a turn sorting themselves out from disorder. And that meant that they've got half a turn left. And skirmishers can make a free facing change at the beginning or the end of their movement, not in the middle. And so what they did was these 2 units decided to make a facing change and just head that way to get out of the way of these troops, because there's a good chance that some of these troops, or even both, might be pushed back by the charging enemy here, and they didn't want to get mixed up in that situation. Okay, so they're out of there. They have got their backs to the action. They didn't have enough movement left to turn around again, but at least they've reformed from disorder and they're over there in skirmish formation. Then interesting thing over here, we had the Uhlans that were down in this sort of a neck of the woods, and no pun intended, because they've moved into the forest. They've moved into the Bois d'Ajou. What they did was reform from disorder, and then they made a facing change and went straight into the Bois d'Ajou. The idea here is their movement is doubled in the forest, but they're not disordered, so they can scamper about in here and hopefully irritate the enemy in some way. But they basically, again, wanted to get themselves out of the way of these chaps in case they had to fall back. Now, the other key thing that's happening is that the savvy Russian commander has remembered that it's 4 p.m, so that means next turn it's going to be 5 p.m. Yes, he's a very sharp commander. The key thing on 5 p.m. is that we lock horns with dusk, and when that happens, the command distance, the command radius, goes down from 600 yards to 400 yards. So things become a bit of a puzzle to try and keep the units of the division together and within command of the divisional commander. Right, so basically, so in other words, for example, if that the Uhlans, that's right, were here, if they'd gone off in this sort of a direction, it would be very easy for them to be more than 600 paces away from a unit that was in command, such as this unit here, because there's the commander. And we've got 400 yards here, 400 yards there, no problem. So that means any skirmishing unit that is within its 600 yards of a unit in command, such as them. So they could have been sort of like there-ish. But things get a bit tricky, so the idea was to bring them over here so that they're still close to Parlan, who was the commander. Also, the advance guard Jaegers moved up, and we can see that they are now within. We put the dice there, the die there, because they are now within range of the enemy. They're going to take a pot at the enemy right now. Let's see what else. These chaps just held their ground basically, because the idea is to stop, of course, the enemy cavalry just sweeping across here and cutting off the Russian line of communication, which is this down this road here. Okay, what else happened? Right, so also, as I said, I'm not familiar with the handling of linear light cavalry units going into and then out of skirmish formation, but I seem to have accomplished it, read up the rules, and I think we're okay. So they had to spend half their turn losing disorder, and then they spent half their turn forming into linear formation out of skirmish. So they're no longer in skirmish formation, so they're a combat unit that will have to be dealt with rather than swept away, as it were. So anyway, they're formed up now. There we go. And they stayed exactly where they were because they didn't have any other movement. Right, they've stayed where they were. They're holding the line, and things are getting pretty tasty down here, though. Let's see, this unit either became stationary or remained stationary. I can't remember, one of the two. I think it became stationary. That gives them 2 dice, and they're going to be firing at these chaps here, because the logic is that these chaps need all the help that they can get, because they're basically by themselves now, being faced by 2 enemy cavalry brigades. So they're going to be shooting over here, hoping to do some damage. Now, the Lancers look like they've had their ride to glory, where they were able to force that unit to retreat and take a hit. And what I've done is I've marked the hit down there with it's actually a pom-pom. So think of it as a sort of, puff of smoke, but clearly not a disorder marker. So that's down there representing 1 casualty, which of course is also noted on the roster that you have to keep when you're playing Volley and Bayonet. But I like to have something visual so we know that they've taken a pounding and they, for example, have not. Right. Anyway, they were back here. They reformed from disorder, and they very plucky chaps. They've marched right up as close as they dare go to the Lancers because they want to shoot at them. Now, they're not stationary, so they've only got 2 dice. Okay, but these chaps here were able to go stationary. They get a free facing change. So they made a facing change so they could aim at the Lancers. And so they're firing. You can make the free facing change. That doesn't count as movement. So it means that you can go stationary at the same time. So they've done that, and they have 4 dice that they can use against these chaps here. Not looking good for the Lancers. We've also got this gun here, which pivoted. Now, when artillery pivots in place, that is movement. They don't get a free facing change when they are unlimbered. So therefore, they lost their... they weren't able to gain a stationary marker. So they're firing at the Lancers. These chaps here, these artillery, this is heavy artillery. Actually, it doesn't really affect the equation here, but they were stationary, but they pivoted so that they could fire at the Lancers. So they've lost their stationary status, but they will be firing there. And let's see. Oh, that's right. The other thing is, of course, that with the artillery now, we can imagine them firing canister because they're at close range, making things even worse for the Lancers. So they're both hitting on 4, 5, or 6. So it's not looking good for the Lancers. I believe the Lancer brigade, I think it can take 2 hits. It's either 2 or 3. I think it's usually about 2 with cavalry, something like that. So there's a very good chance that in a puff of smoke, the Lancers may disappear. Actually, they may be completely eliminated. Of course, they have the option to use saving throws. And when they do that from fire, and when they do that, they have to retreat 6 inches each time they do it. So, of course, I haven't played the game in a while, but it seems to me that if they had a bunch of hits and they said, oh, let's try for a saving throw, and they if they fail the save, that for every saving throw they try, whether it succeeds or fails, they have to retreat 6 inches. So well, we'll get to that in a minute. Right. Yeah, that's not, of course, I was going to say, that's not going to change the range. No, all these lot are going to fire on them now at that range. But how many times they'll have to retreat, I don't know. We'll see. We'll go through the mechanics when we get to it. Okay, and then down here, let's see, we're still supposed to be looking at movement, aren't we, actually? Yeah. So for movement, these chaps here remained in place and went stationary. The artillery here moved up and unlimbered, so they're not stationary yet. And then those chaps in the brigade on the end there, they formed up in the line in the orchard. And there we go. Right, so that's all the movement. We've now got a morale phase, so we do the morale tests. The only chaps that needed to test for morale, it's either if you're in contact and nobody's in contact, or if you're in close range of the enemy. And the only unit in the whole battle that applies to is the Lancers. And as it turns out, they have a morale of 6. There are no other factors involved in this particular test, so they can't fail to pass it, because you've got to roll more than the modified number for them to fail it. And so there's no need to roll. They have passed their morale test. So now we go on to combat. Okay, so let's see what we have. We got the Jaegers down here of the advanced guard of Parlin, and they're on the edge of the forest so they can see out. And so they are going to... one moment, I'm going to get my dice shaker, I think.